I call in Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to take a call on the Local Government Act 2002 Amendment Bill number 3, which Labor does support. We have some reservations about this bill, but we do support it going to Select Committee and look forward to plenty of public consultation on this matter. I'm sure most councils will want to come to the Select Committee and have their say. I'm sure Local Government New Zealand will be preparing their submissions as we speak, and I should imagine that there will be representatives of developers, representatives of communities will also want to have their say on this legislation, and we look forward to the debate and considering all the different provisions. So the stated aim of this bill is to amend the Local Government Act 2002 to enable councils to be able to play their part in creating an effective environment conducive to sustained economic growth by providing effective processes and governance arrangements, fair and efficient decision-making and charging practices, and sound asset management planning, which all sounds very positive. It's almost impossible, I should think, to disagree with a statement like that. Of course, it doesn't really tell us very much about what the bill actually does, but so often these motherhood and apple pie statements are designed to do exactly that, often, in fact, designed to hide things which might be a little bit more controversial, which might have some ulterior motives behind words that everybody agrees with and everybody can support. So, what are some of the provisions of this legislation? Well, the bill provides the option of the creation of local boards as part of any reorganisation of local government by the Local Government Commission. Now, Labor does believe in local democracy. We actually do believe that communities should get to participate in their local democracy. We do believe that local government should be free to make as many decisions as possible without central government clamping down on them and usurping their local authority in the manner that this government has done time and time again. So the idea of local boards, where they're appropriate, is a good one, but what's behind this is the government's desire to see quote-unquote reorganisation of local government, i.e. more amalgamations of local councils. Now, there may be communities who do want to have amalgamations, and assuming that they are done appropriately and assuming that there is good reason and that will create efficiencies that the local communities support, then that's something that central government should not get in the way of. But what we are opposed to on this side of the House is the kind of forced amalgamations which we are starting to see. The system being set up where one community can essentially force an amalgamation on another. We're seeing in Hawke's Bay where central government is trying to strong-arm local government into an amalgamation where there certainly is not universal local support for that type of amalgamation. And the provisions in this legislation are designed, I think, to enable more and more of those amalgamations to happen. And what we don't support, or what certainly we are wary of on this side of the House, is central government dictating to local government what their territorial area should be and where they should amalgamate with other councils. So we go into the Select Committee wary of that being behind some of those local board provisions. Now, development contributions have been a vexed issue for some time, and I know there was a while when a previous Minister of Local Government seemed quite enthusiastic about getting rid of development contributions altogether. Now, the effect of getting rid of development contributions would have been that costs that are currently borne quite rightly by developers for the infrastructure that councils provide in order for a new development to be able to fully function, whether it be the provision of water, wastewater, roads, all the fundamental infrastructure that any development requires. that would have been, the responsibility for that would have been taken from the developer who is not developing these sites out of any altruistic value, but because they want to make money out of that development, onto the ratepayers. Widows paying their rates on a house which may be of some value, but where they have very low income and are struggling to pay the rates, would have ended up having to pay more rates in order to subsidise the profit-making developers. Now, I'm glad to see in what I've read of the Cabinet paper that the current Minister of Local Government, Chris Tremaine, took to Cabinet, that he has diverted the government away from this idea of eradicating development contributions altogether. And that's a sensible decision by Chris Tremaine, and I'm glad that the Cabinet appears to have supported that. But what he does plan to do is to try to somehow restrict development contributions, and it'd be very interesting to work out through the select committee process what the real practical impact of that is actually going to be on councils and on ratepayers, because any restriction on development levies doesn't mean that councils don't need to find the money from somewhere for those capital developments. That money still has to come from somewhere. So if it doesn't come from the developers through the development contributions, where will it come from? And what we are concerned about on this side of the House, that will be yet another cost that the ratepayer has to bear. So it will take from the minister opposite is Antoli is saying, what about house prices? Well, I would love to see something in this legislation then, a cast iron signed in blood guarantee that any reduction in cost for the developers will be passed on to the purchasers of those houses. If there was that guarantee built into the legislation, then I might believe what the minister is saying when she interjects from the other side of the House. But that guarantee, of course, does not exist in the legislation, and there is a real risk that any reduction to development contributions will end up going in the pockets of the developers, possibly ending up in the coffers of the National Party through the contributions made by the developers to say thank you for the additional profit that they make out of those developments. Well, it's possible. It's quite possible. So we are wary on this side of the House of low-income, middle-income taxpayers, ratepayers ending up bearing more cost so that the National Party's mates can make more profit. Now, sir, there is another underlying issue here which I think we need to be wary of, and that is the privatisation agenda from the government. Now, that quite overtly they state in the supporting material that they find it desirable for greater use of private investment for building infrastructure. Alongside that is a desire for greater use of council-controlled organisations, and for those council-controlled organisations to control infrastructure across a number of councils. Now, if you pull all this together, what you get is independent organisations in control of a significant amount of capital investment, and that makes those entities ripe for privatisation. It creates something with enough critical mass that the private sector would become interested in purchasing those council-controlled organisations and taking private control of that infrastructure. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that this is monopoly infrastructure. At the moment, owned by the users of that infrastructure. Therefore, the owners, being the users, will make sure that the costs to the users are kept to a minimum. If you take that monopoly infrastructure, hand it over to the private sector, you then have owners who are interested in making a profit, who are not interested in giving the best result for the users of that infrastructure, and that ultimately drives up costs for the taxpayer and the ratepayer as well, and creates quite a nice little earner for the National Party's mates. So we need to be wary about what this legislation actually does. We do support it. We will support it through the Select Committee. We will listen to what people say when they come to Select Committee.
The member's time has expired.
About the
I call Carol Beaumont.
Thank you, mate.